Started. It's just a minute after the hour here. Um, Wait for everybody to finish up their emailing. Aha. This wasn't a break session. Anyway, I'm Anthony DeBello. I work for OpenText, formerly Guidance Software. As you may or may not have heard, we're doing some integration work with Relativity to, in effect, OEM our eDiscovery collection engine underneath the Relativity GUI and workflow. So today I'll be talking a little bit about that and kind of a few things to think about if you're considering making the transition from a current EnCase product to the future product we're architecting with Relativity. So I guess just to make sure, is everyone in the room EnCase customer or user? Not? Okay, okay. And everyone on this side, EnCase user or work with clients that use EnCase? User? Great. So I'm a director of market development. I've been with Guidance for about 13 years, very familiar with the technology. Over the past couple of years, if you've been following Guidance software, we've been spending a little bit more time in the security space than the eDiscovery space. And the partnership that we've executed on with Relativity is really bringing that pendulum back towards a focus on eDiscovery. And as part of OpenText, we're certainly more focused now on eDiscovery, balancing that with our focus on security. So we'll talk a little bit about why we're doing what we're doing and some of the specifics about what we're doing with Relativity. And then, again, to the topic at hand, some things to consider if what I'll talk about earlier in the presentation is something that you're going to consider moving to early in the next year. Why are we doing this with Relativity? One of the things we found was a best-in-breed model across a single vendor. It never happened. Gartner and others were making predictions 5 or 6 years ago that we'd see one eDiscovery tool to rule them all. Some vendors tried, none really succeeded. The reason I think is there's too many specialized disciplines that exist across the eDiscovery workflow. If you look at TAR and analytics versus collection versus review, the disciplines require specializations that, again, there's no one vendor that has managed to be an expert in all these areas. As you see here, there's a number of quote-unquote best-in-breed players. There's some that try to offer more service-based end-to-end eDiscovery. But again, nothing has really emerged as it relates to a single tool that can support an end-to-end need. And there's some other complexities as well. And I think from what I hear represented in this room, some of those complexities are moving between collections at the client site to review on a managed service provider or legal service provider site. I think today there's kind of a fractured workflow that exists between those two pieces. And what we aim to do with Guidance and Relativity is deliver a solution that can more seamlessly work either from an internal perspective, if you're a corporation doing internal review, being able to move information between collection, preservation, processing, and maybe inside console using Relativity, or if you're a service provider or a law firm, being able to package up data within the client site in such a way that it's easy to move out to external counsel, taking into consideration things like chain of custody and preservation of findings through that workflow. And that's something that we're pretty good at Guidance software, in particular the identification, preservation, and collection pieces. Something you may or may not be aware, for many years Guidance had its own hosted review solution. It was a product that was at one point called Case Central. About a year ago, we announced the end of life of that product, and that again, we found it was, given the core competencies of our engineering team, something where we couldn't keep pace with folks like Relativity, who were focused on review, making a lot of development in that space, and frankly, a far better tool than our own review capability. So as part of that end of life, we kicked off our partnership with Relativity to transition our own review customers over to Relativity, Relativity One, while we start to integrate the two solutions in a seamless way. If by a side, if you're free tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning, we're doing a session where we're going to be demoing the alpha code of our integration, so you can actually see the EnCase collection management process running within the Relativity workflow, bringing it directly into Relativity processing, connected to legal holds created within Relativity, and seamlessly streaming that data into various Relativity workspaces, whether on site or in the cloud or at a legal service provider. And given the intimate nature of this talk, if anybody has any questions, please interrupt me, jump in, raise your hand, however you'd like, and be happy to engage in whatever dialogue you're interested in. On the Relativity side, again, all the orange boxes are where we'll see Relativity providing capabilities in the new offering we're architecting for release next year. So as far as EnCase collections, one of our strengths, and something frankly that does require a lot of expertise as it relates to our engineering team, is collection, but collection from any source, anywhere. Our folks are hard at work maintaining support for new operating systems, new document repositories, new cloud services that provide content hosting, etc. We actually support 7 different operating system platforms. It's an agent-based technology, an agent installed on the client endpoints that enable that connectivity for us to apply search criteria and then pull back a targeted search or a targeted collection of ESI in a secure container that has some controls to maintain chain of custody throughout the entire process. We also connect to cloud repositories, so if you or your clients have virtual machines, for example, in Amazon or AWS, our solution can be configured to connect to those. Box, Dropbox, Office 365, file shares. The benefit being one search criteria, one search job, so to speak, all of these sources being scanned within that same job, that same workflow. So no need to conduct different searches across different platforms. This, again, helps maintain continuity, helps maintain consistency, and ensures that you're leveraging that same negotiated keyword set across all the different repositories that might be in your or your client site. So the way this will work is a collection will be architected within Relativity, keywords entered, criteria entered, whether it be proximity or other methods to narrow down that search. Those keywords can be tested through this process. We recommend, in fact, that you do an initial scan against a subset of custodians to test how much data is coming back as responsive. A lot of our clients would use that process to potentially renegotiate keywords. For example, if too much data, too much irrelevant data is being pulled back, that could be cause to renegotiate against what could be a presumed overcollection, a burdensome collection to narrow down what we're going after in the clients or our own data universe. So this is, again, going to be the Relativity Collection Management Dashboard on top, the guidance infrastructure underneath. For those of you that do have EnCase and have agents deployed, this solution is going to work with those same agents. So no need to, in the transition, redeploy agents, redeploy authentication services, et cetera, that are associated with EnCase. If you're not currently using EnCase, yes, again, this is an agent-based technology. Typically, our clients, upon the purchase, they push that agent out and leave it in place, ready for any litigation or requests that may come to bear over time. We do have a connector today with Relativity. For those of you that do have EnCase eDiscovery and relativity either in-house or through external counsel or service provider. It's a bit unique versus our other integrations with review platforms. So the typical integration we have is simply exporting a load file that can be ingested by whatever review technology of choice. Our relativity connector is a streaming connector designed to stream data without load files directly into workspaces within relativity. To that last point, one of the benefits here is it reduces any human error or technology error that could exist when moving ESI from, for example, collection from EnCase to processing in a different technology to review and production in yet another technology as an example. Another benefit of using guidance for collections is the fact that we work with all the major encryption vendors. We're able to peer within encrypted containers and pull that back when relevant data is found. Compound files like zip files, PDFs, etc. There's really no file type that we're unable to access, whether, again, it be through our partnerships with encryption vendors or the fact that we have outside-in embedded under the system that gives us the ability to reach out into hundreds of different file types, looking both at content and metadata, pulling both back into relativity. Now, that's today. Tomorrow will be a true end-to-end platform, being able to leverage relativity ECA analytics on collected data, being able to leverage relativity processing against data collected through the EnCase collection manager, and the ability to track that information in a single solution from legal hold all the way to production through this system. So before I move on to some of the things to consider, are there any questions or comments, feedback in terms of what we're doing with relativity? Any thoughts out there?
You showed earlier the connector you have, the load list, so the direct import into relativity. I know with EnCase processing, there's a lot of, it's very limited in the amount of metadata that's extracted. Has that been discussed with guidance as far as like the types of, because I think there's only 47 or something fields of metadata in guidance processing, EnCase processing.
Yep.
But I think relativity has like 170.
We'll be pulling back the full metadata, so anything within the metadata that relativity is able to process, it will have access to over and above.
But the data's already processed in EnCase eDiscovery. I feel like EnCase's processing isn't quite as robust as relativity processing. Yeah.
So my name is Saudi. I'm a product manager with a telecommunication product.
Uh-huh.
Are you talking about the existing integration between eDiscovery and relativity?
Yeah, so I think the connector is post-processing, right? So
too deep from a technical perspective, but again, as we're starting to do this work, it's a good time to start thinking about some of the things you may need to do from a migration perspective come the release of this offering. So, one of the first things is really starting to categorize the cases that you have either within EnCase or Relativity. And, each category, if you will, may require a different migration strategy. So for current casework, the suggestion we would have would be to work those cases through your existing platforms, close them out, and perhaps not migrate that data over to the new solution. So there may be some time where you're running both in parallel as you're closing out some old cases to save the pain of migrating if you're getting near the end of whatever those cases may be, as opposed to ongoing litigation for which you may very much want to have a plan to move that data out of the existing EnCase, in this case, databases and data structures into the new format, the new storage methods that would be used by Relativity. Stuff like historical casework, this may be things it's time to archive as an example, wherever that may be relevant for you to do so. And even things like legal hold status. If those are holds related to current casework, you, again, may want to continue those through the existing platform, but you may want to start thinking about how you're going to reissue those holds in the new platform if you think that this or that piece of litigation is something that's going to turn into ongoing litigation, or if, some companies we talk to, the C-suite is always on legal hold. So in those cases as well, you'll want to start thinking about how to reissue those holds out of Relativity rather than EnCase e-discovery. And just to point, given our focus on what we're building here with Relativity, you're not going to see much new features coming out of EnCase e-discovery. We're putting all of our efforts into this collection engine, into the API sets we need to create in order to integrate in the way that we're looking to do so with Relativity. So, in a year, 2 years, e-discovery as a offering may start to come to a close as we focus more and more on partnering and building out our collection engine underneath Relativity, as well as knowing against those cases, mapping those cases where they are across the EDRM. For example, you may have processed data that you might want to migrate over, and you're going to migrate that in a very different way than a collected repository that hasn't been processed yet, as an example. Or you may know that a case is going to go on long enough that you may want to wait until the offering's available to process and carry on some of the other elements of that case. Something else we'd advise is consult a technical expert, whether that be a Relativity expert, whether that be someone within an LSP or one of Guidance's own consultants. You will likely need some custom scripting depending on how much customization you've put in to the solutions in order to map data correctly between existing platform and next platform, any nuances. In fact, I think we just went through a pretty lengthy process. We migrated, I don't know, how big was the case database that we just migrated into Relativity?
Just about over 3,500 workspaces. So just massive number of workspaces in Relativity 1. Some are pretty small size.
Yeah, in that case, it's taken a couple months and quite a bit of work. In this case, with Miley, one of the preferred vendors that Relativity works with, in order to ensure all of these things are done correctly, that there's a third party assuming any risk that's involved in the data migration, and going through testing stage by stage until any nuances are worked out and a full migration take place. In this case, with the case we're just bringing up, as an example, they're bringing over all their active cases first, and then slowly moving over the rest of the data over time at their own pace. And if you're interested in any of the learnings that we've had through this initial migration between EnCase, Case Central, and Relativity, please reach out. We can put you in touch with some of the consultants that worked on that, and they can go into some more detail in terms of lessons learned and some more technical considerations that we're not going to be covering today, but are certainly things that you'll want to be aware of in making that migration. Make sure you dive into the data. There's presumably custom fields that have been created through your use of either EnCase or Relativity. We were talking a little bit about metadata fields earlier between platforms, but this is also any markups, any issue designations, review notes that are associated with your current cases, ensuring that those map into a proper space within the Relativity framework and are preserved through that migration process. And things aren't going to translate exactly between these systems, hence looking towards a technical expert, whether in-house or external, to help create new fields, create scripts that allow for smooth mapping between those fields, and as well document everything that's done in terms of understanding exactly where and how that data is stored, because in some cases you may need to go back, particularly with ongoing litigation, and prove the process and demonstrate the process that you took to migrate from your original e-discovery system to the new system of record. And continuing on with diving into the data, how are you looking to map that data? Is this going to be a centralized workspace or segmenting by matter? As Brian just mentioned, the client we recently worked with, they segment by matter. It's 3,500 spaces, each with a little bit of data in those workspaces rather than a couple that are holding the bulk of the data. Depending on your own processes, that may or may not be a best fit, but the solution supports whatever manner you wish to organize your data, your matters, and the information that's moving over. Make sure to document that structure before you start moving data over. Again, the documentation, as I'm sure we're all aware, being in the e-discovery space at some point could be called upon if your methods, the manner with which you migrated, are called into question through that litigation by opposing or whomever is involved in trying to understand what might have occurred within the data, or try to prove or at least open up some doubt as to the veracity of that data as it exists in the new system versus the old system. And you may even have to set up that data differently in a new system given your current workflows. Again, just kind of looking at this at a high level, but given this is something that we're looking to release to the market within 5 or 6 months, these are things you should start thinking about now if it's a change you plan on making. Certainly this is something that we would suggest you take your time with, given the nature of the matter, given the nature of what we're dealing with, to ensure that defensibility and case continuity are ensured through that migration process. And finally, well, close to finally, assess the risk and security associated with the migration. We've talked a little bit about that. There is going to be some additional risk exposure through the migration, hence bringing in third parties that can assume some of that risk, as well as ensure that you have someone who's tasked with documenting that entire process as part of the contract, whatever have you. Confidentiality agreements with those third parties, as well as security assessments and audits of the new system. I know, listening to some of the talks that Relativity have been given this week, they've recently become certified by ISO. They're looking at FedRAMP certifications, which certainly help. But knowing from the work we've done with our clients through RFPs, RFIs, always going through a lengthy security questionnaire about how we handle, store, manage data, encrypt information, transmit information through the process, as well as document all of those security controls that exist within our technology and need to exist in the new system of record, this being the future version of Relativity that will have our collection engine underneath it and plan for periodic reviews. This is something that guidance we're pretty cognizant of. Another half of our business is focused on information security. And, I think, as Andrew mentioned during his keynote yesterday, folks are constantly trying to attack our defenses, our systems. And through our own work in InfoSec, we see the law firm, the legal service provider, is a particularly interesting target to attackers. Why hack a single corporation when I can go after their law firm and get the data of many, many organizations? And in the law firm space, that's an area we see sometimes a little less focus on security than a corporation that has a full-blown information security team, security operations center, et cetera, et cetera. So as a corporation, I want to make sure my service provider is held to the same standard that my own systems are held to. And again, that's all going to be done through a contract process where you build in requirements to assess that service provider's security, their systems, audit rights, et cetera. These are all things you should be thinking of just in general when working with your service providers or law firms. And then finally, don't forget to have a training plan. These are new systems. These require users that are trained on these systems, not just to ensure that they've got the skills they need, but again, the training of those using the systems could be called upon through litigation as another area just to open up doubt in the case and question the expertise of those that conducted the investigation. I know Relativity has a pretty extensive training program. Guidance Software provides what we call the EnCase Certified E-Discovery Practitioner certification, which is more than just product training. It also trains on chain of custody. It trains on data considerations and things that owners and operators, so to speak, should consider as they're going through a collection, preservation, processing, et cetera, from, again, a chain of custody perspective. As, again, opposing's always going to try to poke holes in your methods, your people, et cetera, and open up just enough doubt to potentially throw some of that information out. So again, through the rest of this process, don't forget to budget, and not just money, but time to train your users on new systems, new processes, et cetera. And just a final thought, if you are considering the migration, have a clear vision. Against all the considerations I talked about today, have a business case. There's new resources that'll have to be retained, new expertise that'll have to be gained. And, we all know, working with our own corporate teams and budgeting folks and finance folks, that, without a business case, it's going to be that much harder for you to get the things you need in order to ensure that your transition is seamless, you have the right training in place, as well as experts retained to ensure that any risk is mitigated through customizations between systems, documentation that needs to be produced, and ultimately get you up and running on that new system while ensuring continuity of cases and continuity of your own day-to-day work. So with that, I'll come back down and